Chapter 29 of J.S. Bach, Volume 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. J.S. Bach, Volume 2 by Albert Schweitzer, translated by Ernest Newman. The Cantatas of the years 1728 to 1734, Part 1. We have not many cantatas belonging to the years 1728 and 1729. This may partly be because a particularly large number belonging to those years have been lost. On the other hand, it is possible that Bach had not much time for new cantatas while he was at work on the St. Matthew Passion. In any case, he composed music to only a part of the cycle that Picander wrote for the church year 1728 to 1729. Of the 9 cantatas belonging to this series that we possess, 5, according to Spitta, fall into the period 1729 to 1730, and 4 in 1731. The cantata for Christmas, Ehre sei Gott, has not come down to us in that form, Bach having incorporated the greater part of it in the wedding cantata Gott ist unsere Zuversicht, Bach Gesellschaft 13, No. 3. One wishes that at any rate the bass aria, O du angenehmes Paar, might be restored to Christmas music, for there is no cradle song anywhere else like this. It is scored for bassoon, oboe, and 2 muted violins. Footnote: the aria might be inserted in some other Christmas cantata. Its original text runs thus: O du angenehmer Schatz, hebe dich aus deinen Krippen, nimm davor auf meinen Lippen und in meinem Herzen Platz. The aria Vergnügen und Lust likewise comes from this Christmas cantata. The first part of a wedding cantata also seems to have been derived from some other source. End of footnote. For the New Year feast of 1730, Bach wrote the cantata Gott wie dein Name, No. 171. Its vigorous opening chorus pleased him so greatly that he afterwards turned it into the Patrum Omnipotentem of the B minor Mass. The figures in the 2 violins in the aria, Herr, so weit die Wolken gehen, geht deines Namens Ruhm, Lord, the glory of thy name goes as far as the clouds, interlock so charmingly that we seem to see the white strips of cloud trailing across the heavens. The final chorale, Dein ist allein die Ehre, with the interludes for the wind instruments, ought to figure in every New Year service. Footnote: the soprano aria, Fort und Fort, is an adaptation of a number, Angenehmer Zephyrus, from the secular cantata Der zufriedengestellte Aeolus, Bach Gesellschaft 11, page 189 and following. End of footnote. The cantata for the 3rd Sunday after Epiphany, Ich steh mit einem Fuß im Grabe, No. 156, gives a characteristic example of Bach's method of representing motion. In the introductory symphonia, the strings suggest the steps of a man going to the grave. The bass has continual variants of the motive. In the aria, the descent into the tomb is depicted by a syncopated form of this motive. The upper strings repeat it constantly with all possible rhythmical nuances. So as to express quite clearly the picture suggested in the words, I stand with one foot in the grave, soon will my sick body descend into it. We could imagine that Bach had before his eyes Pigaul's celebrated memorial to the Maréchal de Saxe at St. Thomas's, Strasbourg, where the motion of a hero stepping into the sarcophagus is so wonderfully portrayed. In order to mitigate the rhythmical unrest, Bach accompanies the song with the chorale Mach's mit mir Gott nach deiner Güte. The introductory duet arioso of the cantata for Quinquagesima, Seht, wir gehen hinauf nach Jerusalem, No. 159, is also founded on a step motive. The interruption after the interval of the 7th is very impressive. Jesus pauses in his walk, turns to the disciples, and tells them of his approaching death. In the interludes for the alto, the reflective soul accompanies the Saviour on the way to the cross. A splendid bass aria ends the work, which has a finely conceived text. The first chorus of the Easter cantata, So du mit deinem Munde bekennest Jesum, dass der Herr sei, number 145, is one of the most interesting specimens of Bach's declamation. See, for example, how he brings out the word Herr. We may assume that the tutti of the chorus enters at the final passage, So wirst du selig, where the orchestra breaks out into the joy motive. The cantata for Septuagesima, Ich bin vergnügt, number 84, certainly belongs to the year 1731. It consists of two magnificent arias, one of them founded on the same rhythm of felicity that expresses in the cantata Halt im Gedächtnis Jesum Christ, number 67, the words Peace be unto you. In the second aria, Ich esse mit Freuden mein wenig Brot, I eat my scanty bread with joy, the sentiment of cheerful carelessness is expressed in a merry dialogue between the oboe and the violin. The text of this fine cantata is an adaptation of Picanda's Ich bin vergnügt mit meinem Stande. Spitta thinks that it was originally composed as a piece of domestic religious music for Anna Magdalena. The cantata for the second day in Whit, Ich liebe den Höchsten von ganzem Gemüte, number 174, is also written for solo voices only. To compensate the hearers for the absence of a chorus, Bach uses the first movement of a third Brandenburg concerto, Bach Gesellschaft 19, page 59 and following, as an introduction to the work. As the movement was originally written for strings only, he adds 2 obligati horns and 3 oboes in the most effective way. The theme of the aria, Greift das Heil, ihr Glaubenshände, seize upon salvation, ye hands of faith, is of deliberate rigidity, as it is meant to symbolize the steadfastness of faith. The basses move along in steady quavers. The movement is animated by the interposition of the joy motive, the music thus really expressing the joyous confidence of faith of which the poem speaks. We have a thematic sketch for the first chorus of a Michaelmas cantata, Man singet mit Freuden vom Sieg, number 149, on a leaf of a score of Phoebus und Pan, 1731. As there was hardly time, however, to work out an original composition, Bach had recourse to the music of the last chorus of the Weimar secular cantata, Was mir behagt, ist nur die muntere Jagd, Bach Gesellschaft 29, page 29 and following, to which he added the new text. Footnote: for a performance of the secular cantata, the figured bass can be played as in the later arrangement. End of footnote. The duet Seid wachsam, ihr heiligen Wächter, die Nacht ist schier dahin is accompanied only by an obbligato bassoon. We seem to see strips of light flickering about in a deep twilight. The aria Gottes Enkel weichen nie is a masterpiece of musical charm. According to a note on the score, the introduction to the cantata for the 21st Sunday after Trinity, Ich habe meine Zuversicht, number 188, is to be an organ arrangement of the concerto for clavier and orchestra in D minor. The organ has an obbligato part also in the final chorus. What prompted Bach to use the organ in this way? It was formerly supposed that it was just at this time that the Rückpositiv of the organ at St. Thomas's was fitted with a separate manual that allowed it to be played independently of a great organ. It was thought that Bach seized the opportunity to accompany on this manual the more difficult numbers in his cantatas and to add extra parts to them. This was Spitta's conjecture. He founded it on an account that showed that in 1730 50 thalers were expended in repairing the organ, and he imagined that this money was devoted to providing the new manual. In the Bach Jahrbuch for 1908, however, B.F. Richter shows that this view is wrong. The archives of the town council show that the 50 thalers were expended merely on the cleaning and better voicing of the instrument. Moreover, if Richter's chronology is correct, the cantatas with the obbligato organ part were not performed at St. Thomas's, but at St. Nicholas's. Bach therefore wrote them to give the organist of that church, Johann Schneider, whom he esteemed highly, an opportunity to display his art. Besides the cantata Ich habe meine Zuversicht, number 188, he wrote about the same time 7 other cantatas for obbligato organ. Footnote: Erschallet ihr Lieder, number 172, Whitsuntide. This is an arrangement of an earlier work. Geist und Seele wird verwehret, number 35, 12th Sunday after Trinity, solo cantata for alto. Gott soll allein mein Herz haben, number 169, 18th Sunday after Trinity, solo cantata for alto. Ich geh und suche mein Verlangen, number 49, 20th Sunday after Trinity, solo cantata for soprano and bass. Wir danken dir Gott, number 29, Ratswahlkantate for the 27th August 1731. Wer weiß wie nahe mir mein Ende, number 27, 16th Sunday after Trinity. Vergnügte Ruhe, beliebte Seelenlust, number 170, 6th Sunday after Trinity, solo cantata for alto. See B.F. Richter's article über Sebastian Bach's Kantaten mit obligater Orgel in the Bach Jahrbuch for 1908, pages 49 to 63. For further light on the problem, see the section on the figured bass parts in the last chapter of the present book. End of footnote. If we come to these works with special expectations, we are to some extent disappointed. In the first place, they contain many movements that have been taken from the instrumental works. Most of the pieces for organ and orchestra are derived from clavier concertos. Footnote. The cantata Ich habe meine Zuversicht, number 188, has for overture of a D minor concerto, which itself is merely an arrangement of a violin concerto. The Symphonia of a cantata Gott soll allein mein Herz haben, number 167, derives from the clavier concerto in E major. The finale of the same concerto becomes the Symphonia of a cantata Ich geh und suche mit Verlangen, number 49. The prelude to the Ratswahlkantate Wir danken dir Gott, number 29, is an arrangement of a first movement of a suite in E major for solo violin. End of footnote. Even some of the arias are derived from instrumental movements. The aria Stirb in mir, for example, from the cantata Gott soll allein mein Herz haben, number 169, is merely the Siciliano of the clavier concerto in E major, to which Bach has added a vocal part. The arrangement is most masterly, but the music does not sound well, however fine it looks on paper. The cantata Geist und Seele wird verwehret, number 35, is wholly made up out of previous instrumental movements, of the provenance of which, however, we cannot now be sure. This seems to be the case also with the numbers of the cantata Ich geh und suche mit Verlangen, number 49, in which the concertizing organ is employed. Even the duet Dich hab ich je und je geliebet is a rearrangement, as may be seen from the imperfect declamation.
Dich hab ich je und je geliebet.
The alto aria Willkommen will ich sagen, from the cantata Wer weiß wie nahe mir mein Ende, number 27, is also anything but a model in this respect. The solo cantata for alto, Vergnügte Ruhe, beliebte Seelenlust, number 170, seems to be composed mostly of original matter. The trio accompaniment to the aria Wie jammern mich doch is very interesting. The organ plays in two parts, and the united violins and violas take the third. There is no bass foundation. It is unfortunate that the text of this work is utterly unsatisfactory. The disappointing effect of these cantatas comes, however, from the way in which Bach has introduced the organ. It plays in two parts only. As the lower part is identical with the orchestral bass, it has really only one obbligato part, which runs from beginning to end with hardly any interruption. This quite uninteresting employment of the organ is not what we expect from Bach. There is no dramatic alteration between organ and orchestra, or any use of the effect to be derived from the opposition of the two so characteristic timbres. We ask ourselves how the master who, in his preludes and fugues, has revealed the special polyphony of the organ in all its richness, could here allot it so subordinate a task. And we are astounded that he did not think of making use, if only occasionally, of the effects derivable from the combination of organ and orchestra. This does not imply that the works cannot be made effective. The preludes to Gott soll allein mein Herz haben, number 169, and Wir danken dir Gott, number 29, for example, sound extremely well on the organ with a clear registration, with some silvery mixtures. In the accompaniment to the arias, however, the organ is less satisfactory, since it really only replaces a flute, and that not very profitably. Even the uncritical hearer feels, after a few bars, the inexpressiveness of this accompaniment. Besides the concertizing organ, there was, of course, the great organ, which accompanied and played the figured bass. Thus, the cantatas for obbligato organ really require two organs. Where only one is available, the concertizing one must also play the figured basses. In this case, it will be best to give the bass part to the pedal and play the chords with the left hand and the obbligato part with the right. When Bach gave these cantatas at St. Nicholas's, where the Rück positive was not available, both organ parts would have to be played on one instrument. We know positively that this was the case with the Ratzoal cantata Wir danken dir Gott, No. 29. We have a textbook for a later performance of the work at St. Nicholas's in 1749. The first chorus is one of those in which he writes in a simple style resembling that of Handel. Whether the aria Gedenk an uns is or is not derived from a Siciliano of some instrumental concerto cannot now be settled. The chorus of a cantata Wer weiß wie nahe mir mein Ende, No. 27, is very impressive. The strings and the bass illustrate the words Hin geht die Zeit, time passes away, by means of the rhythm of a slow, inexorable pendulum. Mingled with the choral voices as they sing of this flight of time are the wailing sighs of the oboes. Footnote: time is symbolized by pendulum beats again in the cantata Alles nur nach Gottes Willen, No. 72. End of footnote. The accompaniment to the final aria, Gute Nacht, du Weltgetümmel, Good night, thou tumult of the world, is symphonic in character. The words Gute Nacht and Weltgetümmel are illustrated alternately, the form by means of a tranquil theme, the latter by means of a familiar tumult motive. The movement thus runs on exactly the same lines as the aria Friede sei mit euch from the cantata Halt im Gedächtnis Jesum Christ, No. 67. In the end, the obbligato use of the organ does not seem in the long run to have satisfied Bach himself. He wrote no more cantatas of this kind. About the beginning of the 30s, too, he seems to have become conscious of the inadequacy of his cantata texts. He goes back to the chorale cantata. Picander first of all tries to effect a compromise between the free modern cantata and the chorale cantata, and to persuade Bach to compose texts in which the chorale verses are joined together by free poems. He interrupts, for example, the first verse of Wer weiß wie nahe mir mein Ende, No. 27, with contemplative recitatives. In the cantata for the fifth Sunday after Trinity, Wer nur den lieben Gott lässt walten, No. 93, he adopted this procedure in two verses of the hymn. One of them is couched in this form, recitative with chorale. What help to us are all our heavy cares? They only oppress the heart with 1,000 pains and sorrows. What help to us are all our sighs of woe? They bring us only dire calamity. Bach here treats the melody as Picander has treated the text. The themes of the soli are all formed out of the first notes of a cantus firmus. Even the volatile motive that expresses gay insouciance in the aria Man halte nur ein wenig Stille is derived from the commencement of the melody. The device may be very ingenious, but it gives no artistic satisfaction. It amounts to a disfigurement of the melody and negates Bach's most individual principle. Nowhere else does he handle the chorale verses in this way. He gets a particularly fine effect in the chorus by first of all giving out each line in freestyle in a couple of voices, and then bringing in the whole choir with the same line. In the recitative Was helfen uns die schweren Sorgen, the bass figure seems to be crushed under a heavy mass. Yet Bach does not seem to have found much pleasure in this hybrid cantata. He now turns again to the simple chorale cantata. We have 15 of these that appear to date from that epoch. Footnote 1. Christus, der ist mein Leben, No. 95, for the 16th Sunday after Trinity. 2. Der Herr ist mein getreuter Hirt, number 112, for the second Sunday after Easter. 3. Eine feste Burg ist unser Gott, number 80, for the Reformation Festival. 4. Es ist das Heil uns kommen her, number 9, for the sixth Sunday after Trinity. 5. Gelobet sei der Herr, number 129, for Trinity Sunday. 6. Ich ruf zu dir, Herr Jesu Christ, number 177, for the fourth Sunday after Trinity. 7. In allen meinen Taten, number 97, for no fixed Sunday, perhaps used also as a wedding cantata. 8. Lobe den Herrn, number 137, for the 12th Sunday after Trinity. 9. Nun komm der Heiden Heiland, second composition, number 62, for the first Sunday in Advent. 10. Sei Lob und number 117, for no fixed Sunday. 11. Wachet auf, ruft uns die Stimme, number 140, for the 27th Sunday after Trinity. 12. Was willst du dich betrüben, number 107, for the seventh Sunday after Trinity. 13. Was Gott tut, das ist wohlgetan, first composition, number 98, for the 21st Sunday after Trinity. 14. Was Gott tut, das ist wohlgetan, second composition, number 99, for the 15th Sunday after Trinity. And 15. Was Gott tut, das ist wohlgetan, third composition, number 100. The opening chorus of a third arrangement of Was Gott tut, das ist wohlgetan is identical with that of a second. The third arrangement was probably used as a wedding cantata. The first two seem to have been composed at periods not far removed from each other. Another chorale cantata, Nun danket alle Gott, number 191, Bachgesellschaft 41, exists only in an incomplete form. The overture form employed in the opening chorus of a cantata, In allen meinen Taten, number 97, makes it probable that it is based on a Weimar or Köthen cantata. End of footnote. Some can be attributed with certainty to this period by reason of the quality of their organ parts, the arias and recitatives not being figured, but marked tacit. This does not mean that the organ does not cooperate here, but simply that the player on the great organ ceased, and Bach played the accompaniment from the score on the separate positive. When the cantatas were repeated at St. Nicholas's, however, he had to supply the figuring in the chief organ parts, and he figured the continuo in full from the beginning. But at St. Thomas's he would, as before, accompany the solos on his positive. All these cantatas have splendid choruses, especially Was Gott tut, das ist wohlgetan, number 99, Sei Lob und number 117, Lobe den Herrn, number 137, and Gelobet sei der Herr, number 129. The last-named cantato has also a final chorale with an imposing accompaniment. These choruses all follow the same type. The soprano takes the cantus firmus, and the other voices the figuration. There is an independent orchestral accompaniment, though the motives of it are reminiscent of a chorale melody. Here Bach's inexhaustible faculty of invention is plainly evident. He can write a number of choruses on the same principle, and yet give each of them such individuality that the similarity seems only destined to bring out more sharply the characteristic features of each of them. The arias in these cantatas are not so pleasing. Bach is contending with impossible texts. In a number of cases he tries to compose recitatives and arias to chorale verses. In this, however, he is unsuccessful. The regular form of the strophe is opposed to the plan of the aria, and its uniform metre admits of no proper theme. It goes without saying, also, that the strophic aria is wearisomely long. Footnote: the chorale strophes in cantatas numbers 97, 100, 107, 112, 117, 129, 137, and 177 are composed in the form of arias and recitatives. End of footnote. At other times Bach employs texts that are written round a choral strophe. There are also free verses, though these do not appear to be by Picander, as they are remarkably heavy and unsuitable for music. Thus, few of the solo numbers of these cantatas make an immediate effect on the hearer. One of the very finest is the alto aria Ich will dich all mein Leben lang, o Gott, von nun an ehren, in the cantata Sei Lob und number 117. In the bass aria in Was Gott tut, das ist wohl getan, number 100, the music in itself is splendid, but the declamation is somewhat banal. Its faults are all the more noticeable as the declamation of the following alto aria is of a perfection rarely attained even by Bach. The solos of these chorale cantatas are, however, extraordinarily rich in characteristic pictorial music. In the bass aria of the cantata Was willst du dich betrüben, number 107, the solo violin has a series of wild scale passages, the tempo of which Bach has placed beyond doubt by his marking of vivace. The text runs thus: Auf ihn magst du es wagen, du wirst mit ihm erjagen, was dir ist nütz und gut. Thou mayst venture on it with him, thou wilt win with him what is good for thee. This example shows how, when Bach is fascinated by an image, he cannot resist the temptation to illustrate it, and for the sake of this he will pass over the general mood of the poem that he ought to be expressing in his music. The following tenor aria, Wenn auch gleich aus der Höllen, der Satan wollte sich dir selbst entgegenstellen, even though Satan himself should rise from hell and oppose thee, gives him an opportunity to depict the contortions of the body of the huge dragon. The text of the aria, Leg ich mich später nieder, erwache früher wieder, I lay me down late and awaken early, in the cantata In allen meinen Taten, number 97, is expressed by a motive suggestive of sinking down and rising again. If a majority of these chorale cantatas do not make an effective whole, the fault lies in the texts, which consist of a string of strophes without any inner dramatic coherence, and without sufficient musical distinction between them. Moreover, there are too many strophes in most of the chorales. Cantatas worked out on these chorale lines require short hymns, in which every verse suggests a different musical characterization. These ideal chorales are very few in number. When, however, Bach finds a text of this order, we get a dramatic artwork of the most perfect kind imaginable, as in the cantatas Ein feste Burg, number 80, and Wachet auf, ruft uns die Stimme, number 140. Ein feste Burg was probably written for the Reformation Festival of 1730. As this happened to be the bicentenary of the delivery of the Augsburg Confession, the festival was a particularly brilliant one. In the first chorus, Bach builds up the stronghold shore on mighty lines symbolizing it by a gigantic choral fugue in the style of Pachelbel. Each of the separate fugues ends with a canon with the theme in augmentation reaching from the pedal trombones of the organ to the trumpets of the orchestra. The movement runs to 228 bars. In the second verse, the fight on our behalf of the man whom God has chosen is depicted by the familiar tumult motive. The sopranos join in with a chorale verse, Mit unserer Macht ist nichts getan, with our own strength we can do nothing. As if calling the hero to their aid, he answers with the song of triumph, Alles was von Gott geboren ist zum Siegen auserkoren. Everything that is born of God is chosen for victory. The third strophe depicts the assault of the devil on the citadel of God. There peals out a signal formed from the opening notes of a melody, whereupon a host of horrid contorted bodies throws itself on the walls. They mount, sink back again, recover themselves once more, again make the assault, again fall back into the depths, a wildly agitated mass, of the kind that Bach has painted also in the cantata Es erhub sich ein Streit, number 19. Every now and then we hear shattering trumpet fanfares. From the battlements ring out the exultant song of the faithful. Und wenn die Welt voll Teufel wär, und wollt uns gar verschlingen, so fürchten wir uns nicht so sehr. After a final effort, the furious assault falls to pieces. This chorale verse is framed between the mystical movements Komm in mein Herzenshaus and Wie selig sind doch die, from a Weimar cantata Alles was von Gott geboren. Footnote: This cantata was intended for the third Sunday in Lent. Bach was unable to use it in Leipzig, as no cantatas were given there during the Passion time. End of footnote. Lutheranism and mysticism. This was the confession of faith that the cantor of St. Thomas's brought to the Reformation festival. End of chapter 29, part 1.